During the Nazis' crusade to conquer Europe, defeat communism, and wipe the Jews, scientists conducted immoral experiments on civilians and POWs, which were fatal or left permanent damage to the subjects' bodies. The studies were conducted in order to prove Nazi racial theories, improve combat efficiency, aid the wounded and sick, develop weapons, and develop ways to reproduce efficiently for the Aryan race. They were usually conducted by individual scientists who had different interests and passions. Throughout the entire war in Europe, Jews, Poles, Soviet POWs, disabled Germans, and more were experimented on in camps mostly in the East. They seem to have rapidly increased after the German invasion of the Soviet Union, known as Operation Barbarossa. The studies rapidly increased from 1941 to 1942, reaching its peak in 1943 and continuing all the way to 1945 despite Germany's inevitable defeat. The experiments varied, but nearly all scientists put great risk on the test subjects, whether or not they would be injected with diseases, gassed, forced to drink seawater, etc. One of the most infamous scientists was Josef Mengele, also known as the Angel of Death or White Angel. As an SS officer, he was stationed in Auschwitz in early 1943, where he began his anthropological studies and research in hereditary. He conducted experiments on people with undesirable traits, although he took a special interest in twins. The experiments themselves were usually harmful to the set of twins. For example, in several cases, one of the twins would be operated on by Mengele or one of his assistants, while the other twin would remain isolated. Mengele often attempted to change the eye color of a twin, inject a disease, perform sex changes, and even conducted vivisection. All of these operations were usually conducted without anesthesia. If, for any reason, one of the twins perished, the other twin would be eliminated in order to compare the bodies. This would often happen had one of the twins been injected with the disease. All of these experiments conducted by Mengele was to prove Aryan superiority, the primitive nature of Jews and other undesirables, develop an efficient method to sterilize people, and develop an efficient method to reproduce for the Aryan race. At Dachau concentration camp, the first ever concentration camp built by the National Socialists, scientists conducted different experiments like submerging men in cold water for an absurd amount of time to study hypothermia, injected healthy subjects with malaria to study immunization and treatment, forcing subjects to drink seawater as the only source of water to study the capabilities of the human body, and putting subjects in low pressure chambers to study how German pilots could survive if they were ejected from high altitudes. In Ravern's book, Concentration Camp, for the benefit of the German armed forces, the Germans wanted to study bone, muscle, and nerve regeneration as well as bone grafting, a medical procedure where transplant bones replace or repair damaged bones. In doing so, subjects had their bones, muscles, and nerves removed often without anesthesia. All of these studies will stop just before Germany unconditionally surrendered to the Allied powers. On August 19, 1947, 23 doctors and assistants were captured by Allied forces and put on trial in what would be known as the doctor trials. Of the 23, 7 were acquitted, 7 received the death penalty, and the rest received 10 years to life imprisonment, one being a woman named Herta Oberhauser, known for her medical atrocities in Ravensbrück, where she conducted and assisted in experimenting on manually female prisoners. Josef Mengele escaped the doctor's trial, and his body will be found on June 6, 1985, having escaped justice. His body is now stored at the Sao Paulo Institute for Forensic Medicine. The doctor trials would then lead to the creation of the Nuremberg Code, a set of rules for human experimentation. The data from the experiments often resembles Unit 731 in terms of value. It seems that the majority of the experiments were amateurly conducted, and a considerable number of the subjects were in ideal conditions, with many being malnourished and sick. But there still seems to be no agreement of how valuable the data was from these experiments. Some argue that they are necessary to use in order to save lives, while others say they are outdated. Either way, the experiments were some of the darkest moments in history, where brutal and often fatal tests were conducted in the name of science.